Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. The little town of Haverhill, nestled between the rolling hills and dense woods of New England, had long embraced its reputation for tranquility. Its Victorian-era charm, lined with white picket fences and lampposts, created an atmosphere that lured newcomers searching for solace. Children played on the quiet streets, while neighbors exchanged pleasantries at the weekly farmers' market. It was a haven away from the chaos of city life. A place where nothing seemed out of the ordinary until one fateful autumn day. As the sun dipped below the horizon, a sickly orange glow illuminated the town, casting eerie shadows along the main street. It was on this evening that the tranquility shattered. A young woman, Sarah Preston, was reported missing by her roommate after she failed to return home from her evening shift at the local diner. For those who knew her, this was uncharacteristic. Sarah was a reliable friend, punctual at work, and known for her vibrant laugh that rarely left her lips. The police were alerted, and the investigation began in earnest. Officers combed through her usual haunts, the diner, the nearby park, and her favorite coffee shop. As night fell, however, the thick adrenaline in the air soon swelled into a chilling unease. There were whispers in the community about the dark secrets that lingered beneath Haverhill's picturesque facade, but they were mere murmur-snothing more than unsettling tales shared during the cold winter nights. Little did they know, that very evening, the first strands of a harrowing tale were being woven, threads that would unravel a tapestry of horror and deception in the days to come. The victim. Sarah Preston was the kind of person who could light up a room with her smile. At 26, she had already forged strong connections in Haverhill, her charm winning over customers at the diner and neighbors alike. With raven black hair cascading down her shoulders and deep-set hazel eyes that sparkled with warmth, she was the heartbeat of her small circle. Known for her fiery spirit and an unyielding loyalty, she dropped everything to help a friend in need. But under her cheerful exterior was a complexity that few truly understood. Born and raised in a neighboring town, Sarah moved to Haverhill after a tumultuous breakup with her high school sweetheart. The split had left marks deeper than bruises. She had retreated inward, relying on work and friendships to fill the void. Those closest to her noted subtle changes over the months that followed. A slight hesitance in her voice, a furrowed brow that lingered longer than before. Still, Sarah fought to maintain her facade, frequently joining friends for late-night talks that trailed into early morning. They recounted laughter, but those moments were also soaked in a silent thrum of underlying worry. As a waitress at the Maple Leaf Diner, Sarah befriended the regular soul-timers who shared their stories over mugs of strong coffee. But often, she was the one longing to be heard, her laughter masking unsung fears. Just 3 weeks before her disappearance, she confided in her best friend that she felt as if someone was watching her. A weight that clung to her, invisible yet palpable. Those words went unheeded, as they were merely the product of her recent hard attribute in hindsight. They would become haunting echoes that would reverberate through the investigation. On the night she went missing, Sarah intended to meet a friend after her shift to unwind, planning to share more laughter. But instead, as darkness enveloped Haverhill, the bond she cherished slipped into the shadows, leaving only an uneasy silence in her wake. The crime scene. As the sun rose over Haverhill the day after Sarah Preston's disappearance, the town awoke to an unsettling silence. The vibrant energy that usually filled the air was replaced by unease, clinging to the inhabitants like a thick fog. In the hours that followed, the police ramped up their search efforts, knocking on doors and urging anyone with information to come forward. It was during this critical time that they received an anonymous tip that would lead them to the crime scene. Just outside of town, the dense woods whispered secrets beneath the narrow path of Maple Hollow Road. It was here that two local teenagers, out searching for signs of Sarah, stumbled upon something that would forever change the course of the investigation. Their yelp echoed through the trees as they found Sarah's crossbody bag, partially buried under a pile of fallen leaves. It was a sickening juxtaposition against the backdrop of shimmering autumn colors, the eerie realization that a piece of her life had been left behind. Law enforcement swiftly arrived at the scene, cordoning off the area while crime scene investigators began their meticulous work. The foliage remained untouched, save for their careful movements. Inspector Leo Marshall, a seasoned officer with a keen sense for detail, directed the team. "We need to be thorough. This is our first solid lead," he instructed, his voice steady, but filled with an unshakable urgency. As they surveyed the surroundings, they noticed scuffed earth suggesting a struggle. Branches were broken and twisted, a clear sign that someone had fought against an unseen force. Hidden in the undergrowth, a small piece of fabric caught the sunlight, a distinct pattern that matched the t-shirt Sarah had worn the previous night. It was a gut-wrenching discovery, one that foreshadowed the grim possibilities that lay ahead. The search escalated as wanted posters of Sarah began to dot the town like tragic markers, heightening the collective fear. Each morning brought new sightings, yet none led to solid evidence. With every passing hour, the townsfolk grew increasingly restless, exchanging theories while the weight of uncertainty molded a once safe haven into a shadowy labyrinth, a place where fear crept in like an unwelcome guest. The early investigation. Days turned into a restless week, and with each sunrise, the urgency for answers mounted. Inspector Leo Marshall gathered his team at the police station, the air thick with conversations that sought to piece together the puzzle of Sarah's disappearance. The routine comforts of Haverhill had been stripped away. Its residents were no longer the carefree individuals they had been. Now they were shadows, glancing over their shoulders as they ventured out, taut with anxiety. The investigation kicked into high gear. Marshall and his team conducted interviews with friends and co-workers, hoping to uncover clues buried beneath layers of everyday interaction. In a cramped conference room, the sound of scribbling pens echoed against the whiteboard filled with notes, while mug after mug of coffee fueled their relentless pursuit. They began escalating their inquiry into Sarah's life, exploring every relationship and connection without bias. At the diner, Sarah's co-workers shared their memories, detailing her gregarious nature and work ethic. But a subtle tension underlined their recollections and unease regarding a new patron who had started frequenting the diner, a man of grizzled appearance, whose dark presence lingered as he occupied the corner booth. He had burdened Sarah with disquieting glances, and as the waitress who served him described her encounters, her voice quivered with uncertainty. No one had known his name, but his misty aura hung over the diner like a storm cloud. Conversations continued to swirl, venturing into the realm of possibilities that stretched far beyond the known. Marshall listened intently, knowing that small truths could point to larger revelation. Meanwhile, Sarah's roommate, Mary, spiraled deeper into despair. She held on to hope, desperately tracking every rumor, while wading through an ocean of guilt for not being able to protect her friend. With every lead turned cold, police became increasingly frustrated, and Marshall found himself awake in the dead of night, poring over case files in search of anything that might reignite the simmering embers of hope. As the sun set on yet another disheartening day, he knew they were perched precariously on the edge of something more sinister than they had anticipated. The dead ends. As the weeks dragged on, the pressure on the Haverhill Police Department mounted. Frustration simmered beneath every encounter, festering in the hearts of officers who had devoted themselves tirelessly to Sarah's case. The small town, once radiant with the glow of autumn, was now cloaked in a shadow of despair as leads fizzled out like dying embers, each dead end more suffocating than the last. Inspector Leo Marshall paced his office, sifting through the endless documents and witness statements. The new patron at the diner had become a ghostly figure. His identity remained elusive, and no one could recall a name. Police sketches circulated around town, yet nobody stepped forward. The importance of this stranger loomed larger than life, his potential connection to Sarah's disappearance pressing heavily on their minds. Without a name, however, he was merely a figment of shared anxiety. Days slipped by, every lid turning stale like the remnants of fallen leaves in the chill of winter. The community was still gripped by fear, and townsfolk whispered about cursed woods and restless spirits legends and urban fables that reflected their growing horror. Marshall felt the weight of their collective anxiety, an unspoken pact that they all held. The lingering question of, can it happen to me, was a specter that haunted every moment. The investigative team's exhaustive searches brought forward texts and social media messages from Sarah's phone. Among the mundane were occasional conversations with an unnamed number, their contents troubling yet vague. The messages were laced with a layer of intimacy that suggested a deeper connection, but the sender never identified themselves. Frustration morphed into anger in the days that followed. A crucial piece remained hidden, locked behind a veil that they couldn't penetrate. Marshall worked through sleepless nights, scribbling potential leads in the margins of reports. Each moment felt like time slipping through his fingers, time that a family desperately wished to reclaim. Sarah's mother, a woman once full of hope, had now become a picture of fraught anxiety, her voice cracking as she pleaded for answers at community meetings. Every eye turned to the police for clarity, but the answers lay twisted within a murky labyrinth, drawing them all into a web of uncertainty where hope teetered precariously on a string. As autumn gave way to winter, the reality settled like dust. Days passed with pocketfuls of nothingness. What they needed was a breakthrough, but they were still trapped within an evolving mystery, each dead end a reminder of the darkness that blanketed Haverhill. A break in the case. It was nearing the end of November when a break came unexpectedly, like a piercing ray of sunlight slicing through a layered fog. Officer Alex Gomez, fresh-faced and eager, discovered a potential clue while revisiting the security footage from the Maple Leaf Diner. As he clicked through hours of uninspiring footage, he noticed a fleeting figure, a man, tall and broad-shouldered, lingering near the entrance shortly after Sarah finished her shift. Excitement overwhelmed him as he paused the video and leaned close. Was this the elusive diner patron nobody could identify? With renewed vigor, Officer Gomez sent the footage to Marshall, who rushed into the viewing room. The grainy visuals revealed the man standing next to the door just long enough to catch the evening light. He appeared anxious, his eyes darting as he surveyed the scene. The moment after he left, Sarah could be sent out 15 seconds later, saying her goodbyes to coworkers. This marked the first tangible evidence connecting Sarah to someone in the diner that night. A surge of adrenaline coursed through Marshall as he meticulously examined the features of the stranger on screen. The officer swiftly organized a team meeting, presenting the footage to eager eyes that had thirsted for a lead in recent weeks. "We need to identify him now," Marshall declared, his voice firm and resolute. The team began a whirlwind of activities, extracting the frame from the footage for enhanced imaging. They contacted the diner's regular patrons and sought out their insights on the man's identity. Meanwhile, Officer Gomez delved into the diner's employee records, cross-referencing past patrons. His diligence soon unearthed a name Jack Reynolds, a name buried within a pattern of late-night visits over the last few months. He was known to drink alone, exchanging scant words with the staff. A chilling theory crept into the minds of the officers on the case. Was this man, quiet and unassuming, harboring a more sinister side? As the investigation gathered momentum, Marshall and his team prepared to track down Jack. Each new piece of information ignited a cautious optimism within the department. Haverhill was still shrouded in darkness, but there were glimmers of hope emerging from the shadows, each hint promising to illuminate paths previously left unexplored. The search for Sarah intensified, spiraling toward a revelation that had long seemed just out of reach. The suspect. The afternoon sun barely peeked through the clouds as Inspector Leo Marshall and Officer Alex Gomez prepared to approach Jack Reynolds. The decision weighed heavy on them. They held an intangible responsibility, possessing a sense of urgency mingled with dread. Anxieties of combing through past records and statements, they had pieced together a profile of the man they now targeted. His quiet demeanor in the diner masked a smattering of unsettling behaviors, and they couldn't shake the sense that there was a darkness lurking just beneath the surface. Marshall's fingers drummed nervously on the steering wheel as they drove toward Reynolds' last known address, a small apartment complex on the outskirts of town, far enough to feel like a shadow realm. On arrival, they noted peeling paint and overgrown weeds at the entrance, a sign that time had faded its charm, just as it had begun to envelop the lives of its residents. As they approached apartment 3B, a low rumble of apprehension twisted in Marshall's stomach. The doorbell echoed through the silence like a haunting chime. Seconds ticked by, stretching agonizingly before the door creaked open just wide enough to reveal the suspect. Jack Reynolds, with a scruffy beard and hollow eyes, regarded them with a curious but guarded expression. The disheveled look only amplified the unease that thrummed in the air. "Jack Reynolds?" Marshall queried, his voice steady but laced with authority. "We'd like to ask you a few questions about the night Sarah Preston went missing." Reynolds stepped back, his brow knitting together in a frown. "I'm not sure I can help you," he replied, the edge of defensiveness creeping into his tone. He turned to grab a jacket, eyes shifting nervously. The behavior raised red flags. The most notable was the way his fingers fidgeted, as if he could undo his own awkwardness. They stepped inside, the clutter of the apartment revealing bits of a life suppressed by secret cigarette butts littered among stacks of old newspapers, remnants of takeout meals on the table. As Marshall and Gomez moved through the tiny living space, the tension swelled palpably. "Were you at the Maple Leaf Diner the night Sarah went missing?" Marshall asked, leaning slightly closer. Reynolds hesitated, the dim room filled with silence, a silence that echoed louder than words. "I was there, but I didn't see her leave," Reynolds mumbled, averting his gaze. I didn't think much of it. Marshall studied him, searching for inconsistencies amid the disjointed phrasing. We have footage showing you were present right before she left. Reynolds tensed visibly, his hands tightening into fists against the table. Something in his posture shifted. Defensiveness morphed into an uncertainty that sparked suspicion. The air grew thick, charged with the realization that Marshall sensed they were on the precipice of revealing something far more disturbing than they had anticipated. Pushing for answers would only lead deeper into the shadows, harbored within Reynolds' shadows, that threatened to mirror the darkness surrounding Sarah's disappearance. With a growing sense of urgency, Marshall knew they had to tread carefully. For whatever depths they were about to uncover could reveal the truth about Sarah's fate or plunge them even further into a web of deceit. The trial. Months had passed since Jack Reynolds was arrested, and as the courtroom filled with hushed murmurs and the scent of polished wood and worn leather, Haverhill braced itself for the trial that would expose the truth of Sarah Preston's fate. Whispers of the case spread like wildfire through town, intertwining with sorrow, curiosity, and lingering questions that had long plagued the community. On the morning of the trial, the atmosphere felt electric, but beneath it lay an undercurrent of tension. Inspector Leo Marshall sat in the gallery, his heart heavy as he prepared to confront the repercussions of their investigation. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Jamie Richards, was determined to present their case compellingly, piecing together echoes of a life once filled with laughter, now overshadowed by sorrow. As the judge entered, the wood-paneled room fell silent, and Reynolds, seated at the defendant's table, looked unkempt and weary, a stark contrast to the man who had once loitered in the diner. His defense attorney, clad in a sharp navy suit, would argue that circumstantial evidence was insufficient to condemn a man who simply frequented the same diner as Sarah. Yet the stakes were higher than mere appearances. The prosecution presented witness after witness, each one recounting the puzzling behavior of Reynolds in the days leading up to Sarah's disappearance. They emphasized how he had been a fixture at the diner, but had patently failed to provide any alibi for that fateful night. Eyewitnesses described unsettling encounters with Reynolds while Sarah was present, painting a picture of a man who crossed into obsession where others saw indifference. The defense, grasping at threads, attempted to establish doubt. They called forth character witnesses, people who knew Reynolds as an ordinary man of gruff, but benign presence blended into the backdrop of daily life. Yet, the prosecution's evidence was compelling. Each thread they pulled wove themselves into the fabric of Reynolds' pattern, steeped in erratic behavior, whispers of unwanted advances toward women, and a refusal to engage with law enforcement. After Sarah's disappearance, as the trial progressed, Marshall felt the weight of the evidence. He had fought hard to uncover the truth, and even harder to unite a grieving community. Now, he watched as each argument unveiled perceptions that reflected more than just Reynolds. They resonated with the fears of every resident grappling with uncertainty in their own lives. The climax came as the prosecution presented forensic evidence found on Sarah's belongings. It was damning yet chilling, paralyzing to those who held hope. The pertinent question hung suspended. Could this unremarkable man be capable of unspeakable things? The jury deliberated, the minutes stretching into hours filled with agonizing anticipation. As the verdict was drawn, the air grew thick with despair. The weight of possibility loomed like a shroud over the courtroom. When they finally returned, The foreman's words resonated with a resolute finality. "We find the defendant, Jack Reynolds, guilty of kidnapping and murder." A collective gasp echoed through the room. And while a sense of justice triumphed, the pain of a life cut short and a community forever altered bore heavily on all present. Marshall watched as Sarah's family reacted, tears blending relief with grief, a bittersweet acknowledgement that her story had transformed into a cautionary tale of loss. As the courtroom emptied, a silence settled over Haverhill, haunted by the specter of unanswered questions, yet filled with an indelible strength forged in turmoil. There was solace, however small, in knowing that the truth, once buried in shadows, had bravely emerged from the dark to shine light on a future built on remembrance. The aftermath. The gavel echoed through the courtroom for the last time, sealing Jack Reynolds' fate, and Haverhill began to turn its collective gaze toward healing. The aftermath of the trial was much more than a legal resolution. It was the reckoning the close-knit community had long needed. Faces that once wore worry and disbelief now bore marks of resilience, as townspeople navigated through the waves of grief that washed over them in the wake of Sarah Preston's tragic story. In the weeks that followed, the dinnerance, a bustling haven faced empty stools and quiet corners. The void left by Sarah's absence was palpable, a missing piece in a once vibrant tapestry. Employees, still grappling with their own sadness, lovingly placed a framed photo of Sarah on the counter, circled by flowers brought by patrons who shared their hearts in memory of her work. Together they fostered a nightly ritual of remembrance where stories and laughter echoed lightly, gently preserving her spirit even as the reverberations of loss lingered. Meanwhile, Sergeant Marshall recognized the profound impact of the case on the community as he navigated the streets, often greeting residents who no longer darted hurried looks, but instead more lingering, purposeful stares. They held hands and solidarity conversations flowed freely, replacing whispers of doubt with a shared commitment to moving forward, to each other, and to ensuring something like this would never happen again. In the local high school, students organized a memorial run, with proceeds dedicated to a scholarship for women pursuing careers in law enforcement. They called it the Sarah Preston Run, an initiative meant to honor her spirit while empowering others to rise in strength and confidence. The townsfolk rallied, donating time and resources, and the event drew in people from neighboring towns, breaking down the walls of silence that had surrounded them. Yet, darkness still lingered at the edges of this newfound light. Sarah's family struggled, their grief a maelstrom of memory, love, and unanswered questions. Although justice was served, they worked tirelessly to raise awareness, sharing Sarah's story in schools and on social media, captivating others with the message of vigilance and safety, a call to action that resounded from every corner of New England. Igniting a community-wide conversation about domestic violence, protection, and dedication to their loved ones. Days turned to months, and as the world outside continued to shift, Haverhill took small steps toward recovery, embracing its scars as part of a shared narrative. Heroes were born in moments of despair, and while the community mourned Sarah's absence, they also rallied around a promise to remember, to honor, and to stand together against hate and indifference. As winter melted into spring, the sun began to shine warmly over the old town, illuminating patches of blooming flowers. Life, though permanently altered, persists. Marshall walked the main street, eyes restored with hope. Feeling the pulse of a community uniting, not just in remembrance of their loss, but embodying strength with every heartbeat. They knew that through their darkness, from story to story, healing emerged as the greatest testament to resilience, a story it would continue to write together. Reflection. As the seasons continued to shift in Haverhill, the ripples of Sarah Preston's story became part of the town's collective consciousness. With the passing of time, the raw intensity of grief had mellowed into something more profound, a mosaic of reflection that captured both sorrow and strength. Residents, forever touched by the loss, began to reconcile their memories, not only of Sarah, but also of the deep impact she had made during her time in the community. Marshall often found himself lost in thought during his walks through the town, absorbing the vibrant transformations that replaced the lingering shadows. Nature itself seemed to champion the town's resilience. Blooming flowers and bustling children in the streets embodied the enduring spirit of life. A park bench near the river became a gathering spot for residents, a tranquil space where they could reminisce, sharing stories of laughter and joy about Sarah, a poignant reminder that her spirit still lingered among them. The heartbreak that had once hung like a cloud now served as a catalyst for change. Local organizations began implementing programs focusing on mental health, safety awareness, and opportunities for those vulnerable in the shadows of society. Sarah's family, through advocacy, turned their pain into purpose, amplifying the importance of connection and vigilance. They committed to nurturing a community where such tragedies became less likely. As the first anniversary of Sarah's disappearance approached, the town planned a memorial event in her honor, a gathering that would unite all who had come together in the face of darkness. It was a celebration of her life, a chance for healing, and an affirmation of hope, a testament to the strength of love over loss. In quiet moments of reflection, Marshall understood that the journey had transformed him too. No longer were the shadows simply an abyss of despair. They now coexisted with light, offering lessons worth carrying forward. Truth, vulnerability, and collective responsibility became inseparable, pulling him toward purpose in his role as a protector. The darkness, while present, served as a reminder that together they could shine brighter, all the while honoring those who had walked before them.